Former Admiral, retired, Joe Sestak, here on the Ed Schultz Radio Show. Admiral, good to have you back with us.
Good to be with you again, Ed. Thank you.
What's your take on Chuck Hagel being the selection to replace Mr. Gates?
What a great man and what a great choice. The president couldn't have picked anybody better for this position. I mean, someone who served in Vietnam with his brother in the same company, 2 Purple Hearts, shrapnel in his chest, an enlisted man, the first one to be Secretary of Defense. I'll never forget, Ed, when the first admiral who had been enlisted became Chief of Naval Operations in the 1990s, Admiral Borda. The shot in the arm to the enlisted men and women, and their morale was immense. Second, it's somebody who actually places America over party. This is someone who is independent, and when that war in Iraq was going south, he actually said, this is not what America needs. I sat alone with him and the Ambassador Crocker, just the 4 of us, with Prime Minister Maliki, in a 20-minute meeting in Iraq. And that 20 minutes went over an hour and 15 minutes as I watched Senator Hagel lean forward and tell Prime Minister very strongly, candidly, that his failure in order to resolve the Sunni-Shia issue to where he had the power to do so was harming America, and the cost was too great. I have to tell you something. You have someone who actually understands that the president needs someone who understands war from a personal and a national level, the cost of it, and that while the military option should never be off the table, it should be on the back of the table. And we should first use the other elements of our power because the cost of war is immense. It may be needed, but it should be the last choice when you both need it for our national security.
So with Ambassador Crocker and yourself and then Senator Hagel, you saw Hagel in action telling Maliki, the Prime Minister of Iraq, you got to get your act together, and your inability to bring the Shiites and the Sunni together is one of the reasons why this is being prolonged and it's costing America, and we can't put up with it. So, I mean, he's a straight talker. You've seen it straight on.
He is, and that's why I said, Ed, that he was a great choice. There is no one in the U.S. Congress that I came to respect more than Senator Hagel. I had been there for 3 months. I'd gone on some interview. He had seen it. He called over to the office and said, hey, do you mind if I stop by for a cup of coffee? I said, Senator, I'd be honored to come over. I knew who he was, a Vietnam vet, and went over to see him. I mean, here's someone, Ed, who understands also about our veterans. Less than 1% of the families of America have someone who served overseas now and come home. And yet he did that for America at a time that was pretty tough. And then he gave even more to America by not only doing well in his private business world, but then serving on the Hill, but also in the administration at the VA. This is someone who really understands that it isn't about just what you want. It's about understanding that there's no greater service than by serving others above yourself. And he can work across the aisle, and heaven knows we need this because defense needs someone, as we see coming down the pike, a fair sacrifice, a shared sacrifice by everyone, including defense, as we have to address our debt issue.
This is interesting from the standpoint that you must have just gotten into the Congress, and obviously I think a lot of people, Joe, turn to you because you're we're an admiral in the Navy. There's not many admirals. I think you're the first admiral that's ever served in Congress. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
I think I'm, yes. I don't know if I'm the first admiral, but I was, that CBO told us that, or CRS, that we were the highest one.
Okay. All right, and so here's Chuck Hagel. He sees you, and he's over in the Senate, and he reaches out, hey, let's get together. I mean, clearly he wanted to bond with you because of his background, having been a fighter in Vietnam and 2 Purple Hearts, and his position on foreign relations and in the Intel Committee. Doesn't that in itself make him uniquely qualified to have experience from those 2 committees and also the view of a soldier?
Yes. And you said it well, because he not only has that experience, but as I sat with him and went over to see him, and then during the trip, just the 2 of us over to Iraq, together for several days, as I listened to him, it was the lessons he had drawn from those experiences. Never forget your men and your women, and he did that in the VA. How he would talk about them, I'll never forget. Being in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, a year ago, I wasn't even in Congress anymore. It was a Veterans Day parade. They asked me to walk in it, and a woman came up, and her husband, and showed me a photograph of their son standing with me in Iraq when I had been there with Senator Hagel. And I'd written them a letter and sent it to them, even though they weren't in my district. I didn't know. But they told me that was the last photograph they received of their son prior to his losing his life there. But I also never forgot how Senator Hagel, as we were there and entered the area of the camp, even though I knew how to do it, he said, Joe, make sure that whatever photographs are taken, that you send it to the parents at home. He never forgets that. But listen, I also believe this, that it's with some challenges in the world from the withdrawal from Afghanistan, the safe withdrawal, as we begin to face an emerging superpower in the Western Pacific, China, that you also have someone who will be a wonderful steward of our defense, that understands that it is part of the elements of our power in America to bring about the resolution of our challenges, but in hopefully a peaceful means. And he will bring that knowledge from that experience, understanding that, yes, men and women sign up ready to even lose their life if necessary for this nation. But he also understands that he will do that if the costs are worth the benefit. That wisdom is what this president most needs from wise counsel that matters more about the America than party sitting right next to him in the councils of war.
So, uniquely qualified, a lifetime of experience of hands-on and understanding leads, I think, to a really tough place for the Republicans to be if they want to politically fight this. Would that be a fair estimation?
It is spot on, Ed, because I believe that as the senator comes forward and goes through his nomination process, you will see in the way he answers, in his ability even there to present his cogent arguments, his thoughtful means of how he approached independently his responsibilities as a senator, that you will see the Republicans will then say, I did serve with Chuck Hagel. And that is the way he was. Someone who came not through ideology to his answers, but through thought. And I think that you will see his nomination be respected as this process goes on. How can they not? They served with him, they know him, and they know that he not only represents, but he will best serve America.
Will he, well, of course, he's the one that's going to have to implement the tough cuts at the Pentagon as we move forward to straighten out the finances of the country.
And that's a great point also, Ed. I'll always remember these discussions with him. Look, he's going to want the strongest United States military that we can possibly have, but he also understands it's not about holding on to Cold War systems. He understands the new types of warfare because he's followed it. He's been on that Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board where he understands gaining intelligence, turning it into information, and then executing it with knowledge, like we did to find bin Laden, is the way of new warfare out there. He understands cyberspace and the means it gives us to execute so much more efficiently and with cost effectiveness if we procure the right systems and not buy the unneeded, often more expensive but less needed systems. He's exactly the kind of steward we need to guide us to a strong military at potentially less cost but much more efficiency. This is the man who has kept up with it all the time and not just holding on to an image just from what he learned in Vietnam, but what he learned from Vietnam within the new realities of how you do warfare today.
You sound like a man, if you were asked, you'd go to work for him.
I'll tell you, I have to tell you, you meet certain individuals and having been in the military, and you make one judgment. Would I go to war with him? And the answer is in a heartbeat.
Admiral Joe Sestak here on the Ed Schultz Radio Show. Good to have you with us, Joe. Thank you so much. Great to have you with us. There is an unvarnished opinion for you right there.